Vu ơi, đây là bản kịch bản voice over tiếng Anh theo đúng nhịp kể tự nhiên. First person, đủ hookman pattern, interrupt twist, giữa video mini CTA, giữa bài và kết thúc mô, để khán giả phải bình luận. Bắt đầu nhé. Alright, let me start with the moment everybody still talks about. On a blazing morning under a mango tree, an old elder asked if I would take a beggar for my husband, and the whole village shouted, "Clap for shame." If an entire crowd laughed at you while your family cheered them on, would you still say I do? I did. I said I do with a voice I barely recognized because my life had been stripped down to yes or no, and there was no place left to hide. I want you to hear how I got there, and how everything turned upside down after. Before that day, I was just the quiet girl with a small Bible and a big load on her back. My parents died in a fire when I was 12, so my aunt and uncle took me in. Overnight, I went from daughter to house girl, from warm bed to a mat by the door, from singing to scrubbing. I woke before the roosters swept the compound with a broom that bit my fingers, boiled water on a stubborn fire, and learned the art of being invisible so I wouldn't become a problem. The market became my classroom. I balanced a tray of vegetables on my head, called out prices in a careful voice, and counted change twice so nobody could swear I'd cheated them. Other girls wore light makeup and laughed in little circles. I kept my eyes on the onions and my mind on the clock. You know what I mean. Still gossip moves faster than a dust storm. Pretty girl wasted life, someone would whisper. Housemaid with no future. I swallowed those words like dry bread and kept working. At night, I handed the day's money to my uncle wrapped in cloth so not a coin could slip. He unfolded it slow, like unwrapping a lie, then frowned, because the numbers never brought him joy. This is all he'd say, and if I explained prices went down or buyers stayed home, he'd stand so close I could smell palm wine and ask, "So you're calling me a liar?" The slap came fast. I learned not to argue with hands. Then a man with a new car and old money came to visit. Rings on every finger smile like a promise. My uncle was ready to marry him to my cousin, until the man said he meant me. I was too surprised to breathe. My aunt laughed like it was a joke and told him I was trouble, a thief, a girl who talked to boys. He left with his pride and his cologne, and my name stayed behind like a stain. That night my uncle slapped the table and said, "We will marry her off so the shame can leave this house." My aunt asked, "To who?" He smiled like a snake. "To that beggar under the bridge." Pattern interrupt. Wait, a beggar, for real. People called him mad, said he wore 3 shirts like he was hiding from the world, said he slept beside the bridge and talked to the river. The village had turned him into a punchline. Now they wanted to make him my husband. Do you think that's fair? If it were you, what would you have done? My friend Eason begged me to run. She had a cousin in the next village, a mat to hide on a plan that smelled like fear and freedom. I wanted to say yes, I really did. But I knew how that story ends. More shame, louder names, nowhere to belong. So I said the hardest thing I have ever said to myself: stand still. Sometimes standing still is braver than running away. The wedding looked like a movie the sky forgot to light properly. Plastic chairs leaned like they were tired. A torn canopy trembled in the breeze, and the crowd gathered ready to laugh. My aunt put me in my mother's old wrapper, smiled thin, and said it fit the occasion. The drummers tapped a beat that didn't feel like a celebration. Children at the gate yelled, "He's coming!" Obina walked in, barefoot, hair wild, a curtain tied around his waist, 3 shirts like a secret stacked on a secret. People exploded with laughter, pointing, clutching their sides, shouting jokes for the cheap seats. But he kept walking, steady, head-level eyes, quiet. When he reached me, he bowed the slightest bit and said, "Good morning, Ad." Not girl, not curse. My name, like it still belonged to me. The elder asked his question like it hurt. "Do you, Obina, take this girl to be your wife?" He said I do with a calm I didn't understand. "Do you, Adis, take this man?" My yes came out thin. Somebody shouted, "Clap for shame," and my uncle lifted a cup to toast my exit from their lives. I thought the ground might swallow me to be kind, but the ground had more manners than the people. Afterward, Obina turned and offered his hand like we were stepping off a stage together. "Shall we go?" he asked. We walked for almost an hour along a narrow path. No bag, no gifts, not even a cup. Just two shadows in the heat. He showed me a broken hut by the river. "Home for now," he said. The roof had holes, the walls breathed dust, and the door was a cloth nailed to wood. I swept with my hands because sometimes you clean a place to remind yourself your life is not trash. He watched the river like it was preaching. We built a rhythm out of scraps. He went to the market and came back with a small pot, 2 cups onions, gari, dried fish. I cooked like it mattered, because it did, and we ate like people grateful to be seen. He asked if I could write. I told him my uncle decided school was for people who didn't owe anyone. He said he would teach me. That night I traced the letters of my name, a D-I-S-E, until they looked like a door I might walk through. Then the sky broke. The storm came early, and mean, tearing at the trees, punching holes through our roof, dumping water like it carried a grudge. We tried to catch the leaks in a basin that was already promised to bathing in a pot that belonged to hunger. Our little shelf fell onions rolled into the mud, the mat drank half the rain and wouldn't stop. My hands moved on their own, push, lift, block, squeeze, because crying doesn't change anything. He watched me for a while and said almost to himself, "You deserve so much more." I didn't answer. Some sentences are too heavy to pick up fast. That night he sat on a flat stone and listened to the river. I asked what he thought about. Everything he said: life, the past, the future, the mistakes. I told him my father used to say water carries people's pain and takes it far away. He smiled small, like the river had agreed with both of us. Little clues started falling out of him like coins he forgot were in his pockets. He counted too fast for a man who begged. He used big words, then smoothed them into small ones like he was translating himself for me. His nails were clean in a way poor men's nails don't stay clean. He looked at the stars like he knew their names, and they knew his. I asked who he had been before the bridge. He said sometimes life pushes you so far from where you started that you're not sure how to walk back. I tucked that answer away. Truth can be shy. A few days later he came home limping, shirt torn, a cut above his eyebrow and a quiet on his face. Some boys had tried to take his bag. He refused like it was just weather, and the forecast would change. I cleaned the blood with a strip of cloth, told him to lie down, and for once he obeyed me. I sat up all night counting his breaths. When the lamp went out, I prayed without flourishes. "Lord, please watch him." That was all. Morning brought a fragile peace. He sipped hot gari, looked at the little fire, and asked if I ever got tired. I said I'd been tired so long it felt like a language. He stared at the steam rising and said, "Back then I complained about everything and didn't know how rich I was." Back then, the phrase sounded like another country. So I asked plain, "Are you truly a beggar?" He leaned against the tree, measured me with his eyes, and told me a piece of the truth. He said he had left his old life behind, housecar company, because he was surrounded by liars and needed to know if goodness still existed when nobody expected a reward. He said I didn't have to believe it yet. One day he said, "You'll see it all." Pattern interrupt, then he vanished. One morning the hut was quiet, in a different way. No stick by the door, no footstep in the sand, no voice by the water. I waited, cleaned, fetched, cooked watery okra, and set aside a portion that went cold. I stood at the edge of the trees and called his name, because shouting it would make my hope sound foolish. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, the village was buzzing like a hive on fire. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. 3 black SUVs rolled into the square, slow and heavy, throwing dust like confetti. Men with clean shoes and serious faces stepped out. The first door opened and a man got out in a suit that fit like a Decision sunglasses, like a wall watch catching the sun the way money does. People started whispering, "Isn't that could it be? No way." He took off the glasses. Obina. His hair was trimmed, beard-lined skin, bright shoulders squared. He walked into the chief's compound and introduced himself. The son of a late tycoon, heir to companies with names you read in newspapers, the kind of man rumors write themselves about. The chief tried to remember if he'd seen him before while the crowd pressed against the gate, eyes wide, mouths open. I couldn't move. Something inside me did the moving for me. A guard found me and said, "Please follow us." My legs carried me even though my thoughts refused. Obina stood alone in the yard, looking like a man who had spent days finding the right words and still wasn't sure where to start. I started for him. "You lied to me," I said, because I needed at least one sentence to be simple. "I didn't tell you yet," he said. "I left everything to find a heart that couldn't be bought. You treated me like a person when the world saw a joke. You saved me, not from hunger, from pride." He said it plain, not like a speech, more like a confession he could finally breathe around. "So you tested me," I whispered. "I trusted you," he said, and went down on one knee in the chief's yard where I had once been turned into entertainment. He opened a small box, a thin band of silver catching the light, and asked if I would let him do it right. Not in shame, but in honor. My yes this time felt like a door opening in my chest. The crowd outside cheered without knowing why. On the way through the village, we stopped in front of my aunt's house. My aunt and uncle stumbled out and fell to their knees so fast the dust didn't catch them. "Daughter," my aunt cried, "please forgive us." My uncle called me blessing like he hadn't called me curse all my life. It might have been funny if it hadn't been my story. "I forgive you," I said, because I was done drinking poison and waiting for them to get sick. But forgiveness is not the same as access. Take food, take medicine, take help, but you cannot take me back. Boundaries are love with a backbone. Yeah, that happened. City life was a language I had to learn syllable by syllable. Guard said, "Good morning, Ma," and I still woke before dawn, ready to light a fire that didn't exist here. I walked through a room bigger than my uncle's house and waited for it to vanish like a dream. Over breakfast, I told Obina I wanted to help girls like me, girls who cried in kitchens and learned to make themselves small. He said we'd build a home of second chances and meant it the way men mean the things that become buildings. Then the past came knocking with two words, "Case reopened." Obina called me into the study and set an envelope on the table like he was placing a stone in a river. Inside were papers that smelled like smoke, even though they were clean. My uncle had taken a loan in my father's name right before the fire. He'd claimed the insurance after the flames died. The report used a word I didn't want to touch. Deliberate. My knees softened. I sat because standing was a lie. "What do we do now?" I asked, hands shaking. "What you choose," he said. I chose justice. Not revenge, not midnight drama, just the truth walking on its own feet. We took the papers to the police. I gave my statement. Simple, steady. And 2 mornings later they arrested my uncle, while the same neighbors who had clapped for my shame stood and stared. I didn't dance. I didn't smile. I went to my parents' graves with flowers and told them I knew and I would not let knowing make me bitter. Pain can sit on the porch, but it doesn't get the keys. We built the center, the home of second chances. I cooked with girls who had learned to speak softly and told them small voices can still tell big truths. We bought books that smelled like new beginnings, hung curtains that made rooms gentle, and wrote names, their names, on clean pages. Purpose is like a bed that finally fits. When we returned for the real wedding, the same mango tree stood taller. White and gold cloth chairs dressed like they had dignity this time, drums rolling with joy instead of jokes. I walked toward a man who had once been a question mark, and now stood like a full sentence. The minister said, "Love can turn disgrace into honor when people choose courage." Obina spoke about a girl who gave her last food to a beggar and never asked for riches, and how that is why she is his wife. I held the microphone and said, "Forgiveness frees the future." but it doesn't erase the past. And boundaries keep peace standing up straight. Some people cried. Some nodded. Some stared at their shoes because they remembered laughing when I wore my mother's old wrapper. That night, I sat beneath a palm dress pooled around me like quiet water, and asked Obina what would have happened if I had said no under the mango tree. He said he would have waited for me even in rags. We laughed a tired laugh that felt like truth. He looked up and said, "No one can stop the story God writes himself," and for the first time, I believed my life could be more than survival. Let me talk to you the way I wish someone had talked to me. Poverty is not a costume. Humiliation is not a lesson plan. Forcing a girl into marriage and calling it tradition is just violence wearing lace. And still, forgiveness is not weakness when it comes with a boundary. Do you think I was wrong to forgive but keep the door locked? If it were you, would you have looked your family in the eye and said, "Take food, take help, but you cannot take me"? Here's the messy part people argue about. Is it ever right to test a heart in disguise? Obina says he trusted me. Some days that sounds holy. Other days it sounds like a wound with good lighting. Maybe both can be true. Maybe we have to talk about power. Who has it, who doesn't, who gets to turn a village into a stage. Maybe the real story isn't that a beggar was a billionaire, maybe. It's that kindness kept its shape when no one was watching. Tell me where you land on that. Wisdom or cruelty, protection or manipulation. Be honest. If you've carried shame like a second skin, if you've been turned into a joke and told to clap along, I see you. If you've ever been the one who served while everyone else ate first, keep going. If you ever laughed at people like me because it was easy and safe, look in the mirror and ask who taught you that cruelty counts as entertainment. Yeah, it's heavy, but it's real. Do one thing for me before you go. Drop a comment with one word you choose for this story, justice or mercy, and tell me the city you're watching from. If it were you under that mango tree, what would you have done? Share this with someone who needs a second chance, or someone who still believes poverty equals worth. Stick around because the next story will challenge what you think you know about love and power. And remember what I learned the hard way. Forgiveness is a key, but you get to choose which doors it opens.